trying to do a presentation electronically, and usually there's some hiccups. So if I struggle moving between various screens, bear with me, but I think, and hopefully it will go well. Now I must just get my presentation up in front of me, and there you are. I need to talk to you about a reserve price, and I have now already said hello to you guys and what you can expect of the term reserve price, the term preferent claim, the term reserve price in different scenarios, and then in practice, daily challenges. And then afterwards, at the end, we can address some questions. So what does the term reserve price mean? In other words, what is the definition therefore? And there is two scenarios in which we can address this question. The first one is economy or economics. And here we can say a reserve price is a limit on the price of a good or a service. On the demand side, it is the highest price that the buyer is willing to pay. And on the supply side, it is the lowest price that a willing or a seller is willing to accept for the good or service. And this, the meeting point between the demand side and the supply side is the so-called walkaway point. Now, in auctions, that is another scenario. Setting a reserve price originates actually from auction practices. And it is the minimum price that a seller is willing to accept for an item. And if the reserve price is not met, the seller are under no obligation to accept the highest bid. And it gives an extra layer of security in the auction process. And then reserve price is not to be confused with an opening bid, being a suggested starting bid. Okay, now I'm going to play a little clip to you. And may I interrupt myself and say, guys, you must please take careful note of what I'm saying and the people, because afterwards there's going to be a little test that you have to complete. So enjoy. Just go back and see whether I can get there.
Daar's nie klank nie, Chris nou.
Okay, net 'n oomblik.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Klaas.
I would like to thank everyone for attending today's training. Please feel free. Then we have a session where we're going to ask the questions. But before we start, I would like to Petro to say something. Over to you, Petro.
Yes, Klaas, we already proceeded. We've done all the introductions, and Chris is now going to display his video to us. So yes, everybody is up and going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Klaas. I'm now just trying to see where that mic is now hiding away. Okay, guys, I'm not going to battle too long with it. If I do not succeed, kindly just follow the inscription on the video, and I will shortly also then try to explain it in a few words. Kan julle hoor?
Nee, daar's nie klank nie.
Sorry. Okay, guys, I hope you could have read the wording, but what the lady actually saying is, and I'm going to try and explain to you in layman's tale. If, for instance, you have got a lot of creditors and you are owing your brother, your uncle, R1 million, and you know you're going to go bankrupt, and you pay your uncle or your brother or sister that R1 million, and not taking in regard all the other creditors, the court may set that payment aside. And that has been meant by the preference in law. In discussing the reserve price and the preferences, we're going to look at the High Court Act, the Uniform Rules of Court, the Magistrate Court Act, the Insolvency Act, and also the Consumer Protection Act, the Act itself and its regulations. And whilst we are at the Act, let's just have a look at it. You can see that the Consumer Protection Act makes provision that notice must be given in advance if a sale is a reserved sale, or if there's an upset price. Already there in the Consumer Protection Act, there are certain directions regarding a reserve price. In the regulations, there's also lots of guidance how the auction must be conducted, whether it's a sale without reserve, and if there is a reserve without reserve, once the auction has commenced, you cannot stop the auction. It must carry on. If there's a reserve price, then the auction is conducted subject to the reserve price. And then there's lots of directions if you go and look at the Act and the rules of how to conduct this auction. Let me just see. There's the rules. I think I have done that now. And yeah, let's have a look at the High Court. The High Court Act is specific, has got no guidance in the Act itself, but in Rule 4511, the rule states as follows: subject to any hypothec existing prior to the attachment, all writs of execution lodged with any sheriff on the day of the sale in execution shall rank pro rata in the distribution of the proceeds of the goods sold. And here comes the one clue: legal order of preference. And then a second one, in order of preference referred to in paragraph C of sub-rule 14 of Rule 46. Now, what does Rule 14C states? In Rule 14.4C, we see that there's provision being made for two types of preference order. One, a legal order of preference, and in terms of the Insolvency Act, the order of preference is set out there. If we have a look at it, the claims preference of creditors ranking in priority in their legal order of preference, and thereafter in terms of the Insolvency Act. Now, what is meant by a legal order of preference? And here is a few steps that need to be taken into consideration. One is execution costs, the sheriff's costs, rates and taxes, and body corporate levies. Now, here's a fifth order of preference, which I did not mention here, but that is obviously the bondholders' costs. And then in terms of the Insolvency Act, the Insolvency Act provides for various types of preference. Section 96, deathbed and funeral expenses. 98, the costs of execution. 98A, salaries or wages of former employees of the insolvent. And Section 98 also sets out the preference in regard to certain statutory obligations. Section 102, the preference under a general bond, and then non-preferent claims. That is all the items that the Insolvency Act makes provision for. And then it's now necessary that we distinguish between the reserve price and the order of preference and the preference of law, as we have now seen previously. Section 66(2) is one that we need to look at. Just get my mouse to the other side, and there you are. Now, what is important here is that no immovable property which is subject to any claim preferent to that of the judgment creditor shall be sold in execution unless the judgment creditor has caused notice of the intended sale to be served personally upon the preferent creditors, as may be prescribed in the rules. And then furthermore, the proceeds of the sale are sufficient to satisfy the claim of such preferent creditor in full, or the preferent creditor confirms the sale in writing if the preferent or the set reserve is not met in full settlement of his claim. So one can say that this reserve, this manner in which you request the preferent claimant to set a reserve, one can probably regard that as a reserve price. Now, the Magistrate Court makes mention on various rules of reserve price, Rule 39, Rule 41, Rule 43, and if one go and look at them individually, Rule 39(2) states, subject to any hypothecation prior to attachment or warrants of execution lodged with any sheriff appointed for a particular area or any sheriff on or before the day immediately the date of sale shall rank pro rata in the distribution of the proceeds of the goods sold in execution in the order of preference referred to in Rule 43(14)(c), which we have now had a look at. Rule 41(21), where property is sold subject to real right of any person is to be sold in execution. Such sale must be subject to the rights of such person unless he or she otherwise waives such rights. And then 41(22), sale and execution shall be stopped as soon as sufficient money has been raised to satisfy the said warrant and any warrant referred to in Rule 39(2) and the cost of the sale. Now, what is important here, this reference to Rule 39(2). Rule 39(2) deals with various other warrants that is favored to the sheriff to share in the auction. And what it boils down to, if the creditor on whose behalf the auction is conducted has paid his debt in full, it is not sufficient to stop the sale. He must also pay all and settle all the other writs that is filed in terms of Rule 39(2). Bear that in mind. Then let's have a look at Rule 43(5). Just get my mouse to the other way. Rule 43(5) states that subject to Rule 43(a), that's now Magistrates Court, no immovable property which is subject to any claim preferent to that of the executioner creditor shall be sold in execution unless the execution creditor has caused notice of the intended sale corresponding with a form to be served upon the preferent creditor personally, the local authority, and the body corporate, and calling upon these instances to set a reserve price. And then if it was impossible to set or give notice, the rules have got further directions as set out in the rule. Then what is important, if one have a look at this rules again, it sets out the legal order of preference, Insolvency Act. And now a further issue is, let me just see whether I can take that one thing away. I'm not sure whether it's bothering you. The distribution plan. The plaintiff being a municipality and body corporate. How do you guys deal with that distribution plan once you have sold the property? I think it is important to take note of the conditions of sale, usually stating that the purchaser is liable for the arrear municipalities' rates, taxes, and also the body corporate's levies. So if you are selling a property on behalf of the municipality for the taxes or the body corporate's levies, once the transfer is registered, in terms of the purchaser's obligation, he needed to pay that arrear rates and also the levies. So do you still need to take account of that in your final distribution plan after the bond is or the transfer is registered? Be careful if you do, because then you are going to pay the municipality or the body corporate in double. So those instances you need not to once again take into consideration the claim of the municipality or the body corporate. Be aware. What is meant by the Insolvency Act Order of Preference? We have had a look at it, and just as a reminder, I can bring it up again, hopefully. It is all those orders that is set out in sections 96 to 108 dealing with the order of preference, which you must take note of. Okay. Then there's further different types of interested parties, and you'll have different reserve price set by them. The first interested party will then necessarily be the defendant, and the defendant's interest is protected by the newly inserted Rule 46A in the High Court and Rule 43 in the High Court, in the Magistrates Court, protecting and setting out certain steps that need to be taken by the creditor. Rule 46A sets out the steps that the execution creditor must undertake when he are applying for the application or the application to have the property sold in execution. And it's a must. And then the court shall not authorize execution against the movable property, which is the primary residence of a judgment debtor, unless the court have considered all relevant factors considering the execution against such property and the sale is warranted. The registrar shall not issue a writ of execution against the residential immovable property of any judgment debtor unless the court has handed and ordered such sale. Now, there's lots of directions also as to guidance for the court in setting a reserve price that need to be considered. It's all being set out there, but that is got nothing to do with the sheriff. That is the plaintiff and his attorney that must adhere to that. And the sheriff only has regard to the outcome of all these directions being the reserve price set by the court. Then a further interested party in this reserve price setting would be the preferent creditor. Then the rules make provision therefore, Uniform Rule 46.5, that states, just get my cursor in down here, sorry, this thing is bothering me. And once again, it states that the execution creditor must give notice of the intended sale to all the preferent creditors, the local authority, the body corporate within, and calling upon them to within 10 days after service to set a reasonable reserve price. That's just once again a reminder of that rule. Then guys, the reserve price set by a preferent creditor in terms of the rules, that is now just being discussed. And then the question is, what is a bank reserve and the status of such bank reserve price in relation to a reserve price set by a court at a sale in execution when the bank is the plaintiff? Question is, which reserve price take preference? Well, if the bank is suing his debtor for the arrears of a bank bond, then the bank is setting a reserve. The court is setting a reserve, and that might be much less than the bank's reserve, the amount of money that the bank would like to receive in terms of the bond protecting his interest. So once the court has set a reserve price and is less than the bank's reserve that the bank has got in mind, the bank must pitch up at the auction and come and protect his interest and also bid till the price that he would like to have. Otherwise, the property can be sold only subject to the reserve set by the court. And thus, the reserve set by the court will take preference unless the bondholder also comes to the picture and protects his interest. Furthermore, let's have a look at another scenario. Under what circumstances will a bondholder be required to bid on an auction to protect his interest? That would be where, as I've just explained, if his interest that is being covered by the bond is higher than the reserve set by the court, then he'll need to come and bid to protect his interest. And it's cannot only be enough for him to just write a letter to the sheriff, and maybe my colleague Pietro can come in here and tell us more about the matter of Nedbank and Botloko, in which her office was involved, and where the attorneys tried to bully her into taking a reserve that was being set by a mere email notice a couple of minutes before the sale. Pietro, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, colleagues, so my office had an auction in 2019. The bank's attorney sent an email saying the bank reserve is a certain amount, and at the auction they didn't bid. Afterwards, coming to say that we were supposed to protect their interest and take the bank reserve into consideration, we said there was no reserve set by court, and that is why we didn't, do that. They had to bid on the auction. So afterwards, they brought an application to court, asking the court to set the sale aside, and then on the basis that there was a bona fide error on their side, they were under the impression we're going to protect their interest, where we said that they had to bid, and in the end, the court said the application was dismissed. In the judgment, it said it cannot be said that the sheriff acted incorrectly. His conduct was in compliance with the court order to sell the property without a reserve price, in line with the conditions of sale. The sheriff was therefore justified in ignoring the email, as it was not a condition of sale. In the circumstances, the application must fail.
Okay, and then the court made the following order. the application was dismissed with costs. Yeah, and I can assure you, it is worrying when there's an application against you as a sheriff stating that you have misread the rules or did not act in terms of the court rules. But fortunately for Pietro, it all went well. Next question is, how is an auction conducted when a preference bondholder has set a reserve price? Now, when will this be applicable? It might be that a person is sued for an amount due to a specific creditor, which is not a bondholder. And then the bondholder sets a reserve price. In this instance, the sheriff can start the auction, but it need not necessarily start at the reserve price. But if the reserve price is not met, then there will be, unfortunately, no valid sale, and will the creditor have to seek other avenues to collect his money from the debtor. In other words, the bondholder's interest is safe. The creditor cannot sell it. Guys, that is more or less my story. It's time for questions and answers. Yes, hopefully there's many clever people around me that would be able to assist me in trying to answer the questions.
Chris, I've got the first question for you.
Okay, let me just see whether I can get out of this slideshow for the moment. All right, but I now cannot see the questions or the hands raised at this moment. Just bear with me. Maybe if I just go here. Sorry. This will help. Okay.
Okay. So, colleagues, you can post your questions on the chat. You can go onto the chat, the meeting chat, and there's a space there where you can type a message for us, and then we can attend to your question. So, Chris, if we
Yes.
look at residential property,
Yeah.
must all residential property have a reserve price in terms of Rule 46A?
The question is whether the defendant has got more than one residential property or more than one property, whether the property in question is being utilized as his residential property. If he's got 5 or 6 properties, I don't think that it will apply. But nowadays, I see that the court even requires, in instance where a company or a close corporation is the owner, that they need to set a reserve price. I cannot answer you with certainty.
Okay. I haven't got any questions on my screen.
I see Rolf has got his hand up.
Okay.
Rolf, can you unmute your mic?
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to set a bit of background to a sale that I have, and I would like your opinion on it. The plaintiff in the matter is the body corporate. He then approached the court and the reserve price was set by court. There's obviously a bondholder, which is funny enough also Nedbank. The property was then put up for auction and we did not reach the reserve price. So the body corporate went back to court and obtained an order for the property to be sold without the reserve price, which was granted by court.
Yeah.
This application was served on all the parties. It was served on the municipality as well as the bank, was served on me as well. I then proceeded to sell the property without the reserve price.
And the bank didn't pitch up.
The bank didn't pitch up. They only sent me an email.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want your opinion now. About a month later, they are on registration already. About a month later, the bank has now lodged their warrant with me. They want to participate now.
Okay, they can participate, but the purchaser will in any event pay the body corporate or the municipality all the monies due, that being a preferent claim. So that is sorted. And then whatever is left will first go to the bondholder, and if there's any other money to be distributed, then be it. But the claimant being the what was it, the body corporate or the municipality?
It was the body corporate.
Yeah, so the body corporate's claim is settled in full. The rest of the money can go to the bondholder.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Chris, I have one question here before we go to the next hand that's up. The question here is, do you start the auction at the reserve price or 1,000 Rand more?
Well, it now depends on the various scenarios there. Is it the bondholder that is selling? Is it a third party? If it's the bondholder and it's his or the reserve price set by the court, then I will start at the reserve price. And if that is fully met and there's no other offers, then it's sold for the reserve price, say 100,000 Rand. It need not to be 101,000 Rand.
Okay, thank you. Then there's a question there's a hand up. I think it's Louise.
Louise, please unmute your mic.
Hi, good day. I'm just wanting to go back on the reserve price that has been taken off from a property where they were sold for the levies. And now, for instance, if they do, the bank was notified, obviously, when the sale has to go through before auction, to tell them that this then the sale is going to take place, etc., etc. Now they will send you a certificate of balance before the auction. Then,
Yeah.
Is it not then our responsibility when selling this property, obviously notify all bidders present that there is a bond on this property, let's say, for instance, for 1.7 million, and somebody said, well, I'm willing to give you 1 million. Then you obviously send the biggest offer made to the bank awaiting such approval. Is that not how it should be when selling?
If the bank wasn't at the auction and the bank didn't bid, then they must take whatever come.
So is it not our responsibility as sheriffs to protect the bondholder as they are the preferred creditor? Not?
No.
So if they are not at the auction, we just sell?
You just sell. And that is exactly this matter of Pietro, which the court granted in her favor.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Because the next question here is, some sheriffs do not reveal the reserve price at the auction. How is this valid if the conditions have the reserve price on stated and you must read the conditions?
I would say there's two scenarios. The one is where the court has set a reserve price, then you must indicate what the reserve price is. If it is a third party and the bondholder has a reserve price, I don't think it's necessary to disclose the reserve from the onset of the auction. You can just only disclose the reserve price once your bidding is finalized.
Okay. And the next question, is it proper for the bank to set a minimum price when you have to do a Rule 46(9) report?
They can do it. It's still for the court to decide because the court has made a previous valuation and set a reserve price. And I think the bank can try its luck, but it's for the court to decide.
Okay. Let me see. I don't see any other hands. Amanda, you can go.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. I feel, Pedro, I just want to mention this. Remember, the other day I made a call to you regarding that fixed property that I had, a commercial property that I need to attach. But the attorney was adamant, the writ was just read warrant of execution in terms of an alabona. It complied halfway, in terms of Form 20. There was no order, nothing attached to it. I had lengthy fights with the attorney and eventually reported me to the board, that I'm failing to execute his warrant. But after all, we've guided him how, what we need. It was just an earth number on the warrant. There was no physical address and everything. And eventually he came into my office, but now after all the fights and stuff, he came into my office like a bulldog. Then he without any endorsements on the warrant, he just went and inserted now the address and everything on it. And then he came back to my office, come running in there like a bulldog. You want to see me now, because he got information from other sheriffs that I'm just trying to be unnecessary. So I said to him, you know what, at the end of the day, you can ask the other sheriffs that's telling you in the area that I'm being unnecessary to get an ad hoc appointment and let them do this attachment fee, because I'm not going to put my office at risk, because, fixed properties is a high claim area. So then he came, and then after all the advice that I've given him, and then the warrant was now right, and you've got the order and everything. So then, he said he don't like the tone that in which I've addressed the board and stuff, because he even called my immovable clerk that's working in that the department for 27 years. He called us stupid. And he said, yeah, we're sheriffs. We are not there to question any warrants. So I said, so there's a lot of warrants that gets issued. There's a lot of fraudulent warrants out there. So you can't tell me that I don't have the right to check a warrant. He said, you're just there to execute. I'm the attorney. I said, yeah, and if things goes wrong on our side, then the attorneys are standing. So it's just like, a lesson to all the other sheriffs. To peruse documents and stuff. I told him, you're not just going to come and bring a document that's halfway filled in and expect me to just execute. So eventually you got the proper issue document, and then I've now decided to do it. And then I said to him, you must please send an apology to the board and tell them that eventually your document is correct, and now I will execute it for you. So it's just, I just want to warn other sheriffs, to please don't let attorneys be dominant on them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, so now that we've been holding the warrant, so I think in this week they'll be able to assist you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
No, Amanda, I think the issue is that this warrant.
She can assist you. No.
Proceed, Chris.
Yeah, today should be able to assist. You can just.
I think what it boils down to is that the registrar issued this writ incorrectly because the rule is very adamant or clear, Rule 46A and 43A, that you can no longer issue a writ
We'll do
against
it
fixed
today.
property unless
Just
certain steps has been taken in line with those rules. The nulla bona is one step in the parcel, but you need to follow the directions of Rule 46A and 43A. So well done, Amanda.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. And then he still had the audacity when he came into my office to ask me, which rule books are you using? So I asked him, sir, there on my bookshelf, what does it look like that's standing there? And then he like went all red in his face, you know. So yeah. So I think he came there, he thought, you know, I've got one of those offices where I'm not even using rule books. So my receptionist asked me, ma'am, what did you do to this attorney? Because he came in here like a bulldog and he went out here like a puppy. So I said, yeah. I had to show him, you know, that he's dealing with professionals and yeah, so yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Amanda. Chris, we have another hand there, Sheriff Santa North.
Okay, and I see Louise's hand is also up again. Sheriff North.
Thank you, colleagues. Chris, I just would like to find out, this question relates to the distribution of the sale process, no?
Yeah.
If the body corporate is a plaintiff, the property is sold, transfer is effected, and before transfer is effected, the levies are settled, okay? Under what circumstances can the body corporate still demand to participate in the distribution of the sale process?
They cannot, because they have received all the money before transfer has taken place. So there's no way they can have a further claim.
Wow, because we have quite a lot of such demands to pay the body corporate.
No.
It's always an uphill battle to make them understand that your claim has been settled already.
Exactly, yeah.
So there cannot be a second payment on one claim.
Not
Okay,
at
that's
all.
fine.
Not at
So
all.
we just keep on doing that.
Yeah. Send them to the warm place.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I have another question here on the chat group. It says, if sale is for the municipality, no bondholder, and property is sold for X amount, the purchaser pay the municipality as per conditions for clearance. Will the purchase price then be paid to the debtor?
Yeah. Yeah, the debtor gets the surplus.
Same scenario as the body corporate, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Then when we look at this is the last question. When you look at a body corporate versus bondholder, which one would be preference?
The body corporate. The body corporate and the municipality takes preference.
Okay. Thank you. It looks like there's no further questions on the chat group. There's no hands up. There's a question. There was just a request from Marks that we share this judgment, the one that we spoke to earlier from our office.
Okay.
That we share that. We can do that. But yes, it looks like there's no further questions for you, Chris. So,
thank you.
Annelie Erasmus says thank you. Richard says thank you to Pietro and Chris. Yes. But thank you for that colleagues joined Free State here for this important topic. And yes, enjoy your day further.
Thank you. It's raining in Bloemfontein.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Pedro and Chris. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
colleagues. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Bye.